we haven't come to that one particular issue. What Mr. Rungta also mentioned about adult guardianship. That's a very important thing, because
we should talk about.
Because at the end of the day, there are personal experiences and what friends and some people, colleagues have mentioned. An elderly person who is progressively unable to understand things, and because of age-related issues. Small thing like signing, I mean, your signature will change. You may not be able to, if you come on a video. My mother had this thing about she had to validate that she was alive for a life certificate. Now, for a little time, she had this, her head would shake. Now, you try to video record a shaking head, it will not accept it. So, my son then held her back, at the back, she held her neck and then he took it. Now, why do you have to do all this? It's really not required. It's her wealth. It's her money. It's her hard-earned savings, So, I think an adult guardianship there has to be a different approach towards how senior citizens and their wealth and how they handle the management of that wealth needs to be looked at. Needs to be looked at very differently than an ordinary person, because there's a lot of things to be done on that.
So our finding, and the reason why we included this in the study almost towards the end, was this, that a lot of people, I'm sure it applies to most people in this room, that you have adequate savings, you have money in the bank, but if something happens to you, nobody is able to access your bank account. So you may have some cash lying at home. Once you run out of that, to even keep you in hospital, or if you need daycare, in spite of the fact that you have an asset, you're probably living in a 3-bedroom house in a prominent part of Bombay, you have maybe over 1 crore of rupees in various FDs, but because nobody can access it. Now, if you have children, they have to go to court, get an order. I believe courts are quite receptive about it, but only siblings, parents, if there is a problem with a child, it usually doesn't happen because the parents have the money. Only siblings and children have been able to go to court and get an order to access in a limited way, with regular reporting to an authority that they are using the money for what it's supposed to be, to look after the incapacitated person. Now, I was surprised that when we mentioned this, even the people that we talked to in the legal circles had no idea that not everybody is willing to take care of people. Either you do jugaad, where you're able to access money and you also use it for other things. But if you have a third party, suppose you have no child, then that third party needs to be paid. He needs to be able to have the money to take care of you, go to court, do the reporting, do the accounts. Everything is rupees and paisa at the end of the day. Hiring people, the help doesn't come, you have to keep changing them. It's a lot of time and energy, and there is zero thought to this at all. We are a country which is aging rapidly. We have nuclear families. There are lots of people who are coming and saying that, our children are abroad, I'm living alone, and every day I'm worried what will happen to me if, say, I fall by the roadside, nobody recognizes me, or something happens to me, neighbors will come for a few days. After a while, they say, we can't access his bank account. Who's going to go to court on his behalf? Now, the rest of the world, the state is very clear that they have a responsibility towards that person. In India, you may have paid taxes at 40%, but we have no concept of social security. We have no concept of the state being responsible for you and acting on your behalf, which is one of the reasons why when we put out this today's event, I had requested people like Sailesh Mishra and Nasreen Wisdom-Fram that please come and listen to this, because ultimately the legal advice that we had was you will need a separate legislation for this, because it has not been thought about at all. So I'm going to hand it to Mr. Rungta, because I'm sure he knows a lot of examples of jugaad that take care of this, but that's not the answer. You need to have the state thinking about it and providing legal structures for it.
So, I've had unfortunate personal experience about it. My father had a stroke and he sort of got bedridden also his cognizance was affected. Uh, Excellent record keeper. So everything was in order. Taking over was no issue at all. Okay. Everything was there, but everything was in a single name. Everything was in a single name. So we did jugaad. I mean, we looked at guardianships and things like that. At that time, I was not that clued on. In fact, that unfortunate incident made me clued on. So for our clients now, we have power of attorneys, but unlikely they will work if you actually, they're not lasting powers of attorney. So you would need change in law that will allow those power of attorneys to continue despite the inability or the non-contractual ability. Again, all credit to SEBI, and I think because Pramod Rao is sitting there, we have to give him this credit that in the consultation paper they have spoken about it. Again, it is one regulator which has spoken about it. There are no solutions. It is a complex problem because it is very open to misuse. Okay, all the jugaad is open to misuse. This guardianship that we will do is also open to misuse, and therefore there needs to be checks and balances. Checks and balances for the people who are, who have a clear mind, clear conscience. For them, those checks and balances are annoyances, but those need to be kept there. So it is a complex issue. I think we need to talk about it, and again, all credit to SEBI that they have opened that dialogue, and hopefully, the other regulators will take it up. Again, there, if you see, RBI has a standard system, and it is working. The pension, because a lot of government pension comes there, and a lot of pensioners have this problem. So they have worked out a system. In fact, we used part of that system where the officer comes home, it is signed in front of him. So I think they have a system. It needs to be codified so that it can really be something that is available.
Just to add to that, I think it's also the societal structure. Like Sujata correctly mentioned, we are now in a nuclear family era. So we don't have the support of a joint family. On the other hand, transmission of wealth is happening after death, not before death. So earlier it would be the head of the family would then nominate or decide that so and so would now take my place. He would retire, vanvas phase kind of thing. And then that person or those persons will start running with it. We don't have that luxury now because old age needs financing. Old age needs to be funded. So if you have earned X amount of money, 1/3 of X needs to be kept for you to take care of your old age. So you can't give that capital for somebody else to manage, and maybe they are not there to manage in the first place. So that complexity comes in because of that issue. That's my reading of it. Now, what probably can be done is something like nomination. You give a facility for leaving instructions. Maybe I'm just thinking aloud here. That maybe in a demat account or in a trading account or maybe in a bank account, you leave instructions as you would leave a nomination, that in case I'm incapacitated and somebody is able to certify my incapacitation, then so and so should be allowed to operate the account for this purpose. Maybe that sort of thing can help out.
I think that will require a lot of checks and balances.
Yes.
So the Kerala High Court has put a list which we have talked about in this. What kind of checks and balances, even when it's a sibling. So maybe some of that will have to be incorporated if this has to work. But like I said, it's a separate and long discussion for a new statute. You agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, but this is something that is going to be center stage as we go along. It's adult guardianship or what happens. It is a nuclear family, and this tendency for people who are today young not to have children. I think very quickly is going to maybe 15, 20 years down the line, we are going to have a situation where we will need to, by then, have a workable solution to this.